All right. Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ItCast, Real Talk on Sex. I am your host, Nika Sherelle. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. Please join us at our upcoming events this November 7th, 4th through 7th. We are going to be celebrating the chase. It is a fun event where we're going to go out into the woods and have a blast with some hot tubs and some, I don't know, other stuff. Call me if you want to know. So the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit is coming up. It's going to be the February 4th and 5th, 2023. We have early bird tickets coming soon to you in October. You can learn more at sexhealthsummit.com. Get one-on-one coaching with me by visiting my link tree for a free connection session. Ask us anything. We want to hear from you. So go ahead, pop it in the chat, leave it in the comments. We also have a lovely Google form that you can fill out in advance. And if you want to be anonymous, that is perfect. But we would love to hear from you. Click the link to have your questions answered, get access to our bonus content on Patreon, subscribe to this YouTube channel right here, and share with your community. All right. We're going to go ahead and dive in. This week's topic is real talk on practicing pleasure. Like that. Today in the booth, we have River Drosera. River is a somatic sex educator and sexological body worker for queer folks and women seeking support with scar tissue remediation, reconnecting after trauma, learning to ask for what they want, and honoring their body's internal wisdom. They offer both online support and in-person sessions in Sacramento, California. River is also the creator of the Erotic Arts Project, a queer-centered online space that offers workshops and courses celebrating the erotic and creative body. River, come on and join us on the show.
Hi. It's so nice to have you introduced like that.
You are welcome. Thank you. So the first thing we go over is to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're choosing to do the show.
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. So, as stated before, I'm a somatic sex educator. I tend to work primarily with queer folks and women around just reconnecting to their bodies with a central focus on pleasure. And I was really excited to be connecting to y'all here, and I think the way that you have it set up with it going to like YouTube and Facebook, and really I love the introduction for the show. What you just said right there around really giving voices to all kinds of folks and really making, having sex positivity really be shared worldwide, and to be able to have all kinds of topics and to just give room and space for all kinds of folks to share the like beautiful world of sex education, because it's hard to do sometimes. So yeah, appreciate that.
Thank you. It's about access. It's access and community. If you don't know about these things, then there's a missing, the sex positivity might not be there. I could tell you so many things back before I understood pleasure that were just commonplace. So thank you for the work that you're doing and actually being in the space of healing that part for, so many people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
And, all right. So what is practicing pleasure?
So the somatic part of the somatic sex education is soma is the Greek root word for the living body. So it's thinking about what is it like to be you in your own body? What is your experience of having a body? And somatics was a term that was coined, but really these practices and feelings and honoring your body and sensations is really timeless. And so, the somatic part is really dedicated to practice. And so when it comes to sex education or bodies, there's of course, shows like this and all kinds of things out there that can really talk about and invite in all kinds of voices to be able to talk about sex education. And the somatic piece is really more towards tuning into the body and reconnecting to the self as a part of practice. So practicing pleasure becomes something that generally I think people sort of think is a little bit easy to do, but once they start really doing it, it can come up with like, oh, I didn't realize this was going on, or this is harder to do because we live in cultures, you know, based in the United States, and the culture is like very informed by capitalism, and it's very much about not paying attention to your body. And so connecting back to it, starting to pay attention to it as a practice, and focusing on pleasure, not just with the genitals or, you know, just expanding the idea of pleasure to food, to being in nature, to friendship, to all these kinds of avenues. And that pleasure is really a whole body experience. And yeah, so to practice that can be really juicy for people.
That's real. That's real. Like when you said it's harder than you think, like it's so true, because there's a vulnerability in that space and a lot can come up. Like, yeah, I love therapy. I'm a big supporter of, you know, being able to have those conversations and move through the things that are blocking you. And it's as I've gone through these processes of healing, there's a lot of like, sit with your grief, sit with your sadness, sit with your anger, like work through these things. Like it's okay to have these feelings, but I've never heard the sit with your pleasure. Like, you know, yeah. And it's not just sex and sexuality, but like, just, I'm going to practice that. Like,
yeah. And the enjoyment of being in your body, or what you like about it, and how your body relates to other people, to your own experience, and to the world around you. And so, yeah, this practice piece is really interesting because it does continue on this thread of being able to repeatedly reconnect. And when that practice is there, there's of course roadblocks that come up, but those things can be really interesting points where someone can explore something a little bit further, where like, or even, you know, people do think about pleasure as being this like, oh, it's all about orgasms, oh, it's really, you know, positive. And it is like, we want to like, yeah, of course, but also when people do sit with grief, even as a part of their pleasure practice, and do sit with some of these uncomfortable feelings, or, you know, all of it, that those places and those kinds of feelings can be teachers, and we can really move through stuff and move through blockages that we might have, or uncomfortable feelings, to get to the other side where pleasure is. And so it's like we're inviting in all of this into the practice, with the compass being pleasure.
Ooh, the compass. Yeah, I mean, like I love what you said about the fact that it's not just sex, like working through the difficulty, like the things that are most worth having are going to be like, the challenge is worth it. And I, I'm just sitting here like that deep internal look of like, I get to sit in this space and deal, like the roadblocks are going to come up, and to not run, because I run. I'm like, no, what am I doing? I'm not supposed to feel this good. Like,
yeah, because it can be a little, you know, it can be uncomfortable, or sometimes maybe turning away from it is okay for the moment. We can come back to it another time, and, you know, be really like, it's also a practice in being really kind to ourselves. And along the way of our path of like, you know, if we do come up to something, can we sit with it, or does it need to happen another day because we're feeling overwhelmed with other things? And to just be really generous. And that in itself, like when I'm supporting people with developing a pleasure practice, no matter what we're doing, whether even if it is scar tissue sessions, in between there is pleasure practice that can happen for folks so that they can start to really go on this journey of like orienting themselves to pleasure. Because most of the time, most of us have been taught not to do that, to turn away from it. But yeah, that there's this just the expansion of it, but also the sitting with it, of all the feelings that can come up and how that can really be this beautiful world to tap into if we choose to do that as a part of our pleasure practice. And understanding that like the pleasure doesn't just exist in the pelvis, which kind of creates this separation from pelvis to the rest of the body, but the pelvis is, and everything is very integrated. It's our whole body is an entire ecosystem. So we experience all kinds of things throughout our entire body. And so tuning into and learning how to talk about sensation and how you're feeling in an emotional way, but what's really happening on a sensory, visceral level in your body. You might notice that there's stuff happening in your heart space, or down at your feet, or maybe you realize that you haven't really paid attention to your feet before. But you know, this starts to move then the idea of pleasure to all kinds of spaces in the body, and that it's really like your skin is the largest organ, and it's constantly sensing things. And so the pleasure practice is being able to give time to really be like, what is that it's experiencing, and how do I make sense and meaning of what I'm experiencing?
Yeah, I love that. You said developing a pleasure practice. And right, I think that's so critically important. One of the other things you pointed to was like capitalist society. So like we're not in that wave thought of how can I develop a pleasure practice when it's work, work, work till you get to like the destiny out there where you're going to be happy when you have enough. And the truth is you never feel like you're never going to have enough if that's your approach. So so like just taking the time, step back and be with oneself. So tell me about that. What do I do?
When I work with people on this, and start creating a pleasure practice, you know, folks have all kinds of feelings about it. Could be like, well, maybe, or like, yes, I want to do this. And they like hop right in, and we talk about creating space and in their homes, and like making a spot for themselves if they're able to do that, to have like altars if they're into things like that, to be like, this is your spot, this is your time. Of course, time always is a huge issue because we are really overworked culture here in the States. And so then it becomes, how can we paying attention to like the things that we already do that we may not think of as being pleasure practice. So like I often am working with people who have children, or who are just working a lot. And so they're like, I can't do a half an hour every day or an hour. Like, it's like, okay, well, you don't have to, but let's have those moments for when you can do that. And you can really sit with your body and touch your whole body and practice your breath, and really like, you know, if you want to look at yourself in the mirror or play music and really make it this ritual for yourself. But also, here's what you can do in those little moments, like the shower, you know, just enjoying your shower in the morning and just feeling what it feels like to have the water run over your skin and how enjoyable that is. Or like delicious food, like food ends up being a really big experience for people, of like, cooking with people that they love, and then being able to eat that and be like, oh, it warms my heart, it warms my belly, it makes me feel really, really alive and really connected. And so we kind of come up with plans where it's like, here's this thing, here's your like ideal, and you can tap into it when you have the energy, but let's really be realistic in the world that we're living in also. So like these like small sort of turning towards pleasure moments of things that you already do throughout the day.
I like that. What I heard in your share was gratitude. Like when you take that second to have, like, that's when you feel the pleasure. Like it comes in and it flows, and it's like, okay, like this is something to be thankful for, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
When you talked about like the body sensation on, so first off, I love the shower. I love any water.
Yes.
Any water anywhere. But a couple of things. I thought about like morning coffee. Like that's such a ritual for people, and like getting that there's pleasure in that. And then I was in a mental fitness for entrepreneurs course last night, and the instructor, the exercise was to hold up your hand and to take your other hand and like gently caress it with the tips of your fingers.
Like just watching you do that, I'm like, yeah.
Right.
Oh, that feels so good.
It's nice. And like the entire point was to pull you out of your thoughts and your stress. And it was like, so just tidbit, because that was all related to that skin sensation.
That's exactly it. And so, I mean, I love that in particular because the hands are doing so much for so many of us throughout the day. And they really have a lot of nerve endings. And so I think that's a brilliant way to kind of start tuning into that. And that kind of like thinking about pleasure and expanding it to all areas of our life can really support people who have had trauma, who might not be ready quite yet to tap into their pelvis. And so these other kinds of light ways of getting to know the body, feeling it through these really like gentle ways can be supportive for those folks too.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk a bit more about trauma. Like you brought that up, and I'm like,
okay.
Yeah, and it's a big one. Like that's a huge stopgap. I know for myself, there were times when like I couldn't even, like it was like, I was doing this exercise in a tantra class, and it was like, okay, so like, like touch your, touch your, I'm not going to get any of the words right. So, this chakra, and then here, and then here. And, and then like further down. And when I got to my heart, I could not touch my heart. Like it was so intense. The feeling was so intense that I was like, I couldn't even breathe or be with it. So trauma shows up in a bunch of different ways. And I know you talked about the, the physical scars and like working those out, but then also the emotional scars. So big arena.
Yeah. And I think the way you described it is really helpful, just like your own experience, because that's really common. And so where people might be in a class or might be starting to do this work, and then they realize like, ooh, or get overwhelmed and something might be there, or maybe they do have an understanding of their trauma and they get to a point maybe in therapy where therapy has helped quite a bit, because talk therapy is really helpful. But they're realizing there's something that's going on in the physical realm, especially I get a lot of folks who are, feeling difficulties relating to other people. So yeah, I do work with physical scar tissue. So that's a part of sexological body work, which is, I tend to work with people who've had like birthing scars or have surgeries or anything that's kind of impacting their pleasure, trans folks who have top surgery, who just want to like experience what that's, the joy of like their chest. But I would say the emotional scar tissue is really similar in that if there's chronic overwhelm or something that's gone on that is repeated, and so trauma can be like this loop, if it's not settled and we're in this loop with it, it can affect like my shoulders start to go up towards my ears, and that becomes a chronic, position. And we don't want to like say that's bad or anything. This is just the way our bodies are trying to protect ourselves. So we want to honor that they're doing what they think they should be doing. But we can start to let them know to maybe relax a little bit more. And we work with that really slowly. But even in that, it can create adhesions within the muscles. So adhesions would be like the tissues or the muscles aren't able to slide and glide and move as much. And that can create some pain for people. And so, we're just, uncertainty or feeling like they're, scared a lot or whatever is happening to them, because trauma really affects everyone so differently.
Yeah.
So each person that I work with, it's a very like slow process if they have that going on. And touch is one of the most effective ways to connect with that once the person is ready and once they ask for that. So, and the touch that I work with emotional scar tissue. So yeah, sometimes people come to me and they're like, I want this and I want to have like, boom, the best orgasms ever or something. But then they have a long, list of stuff that they've experienced and that hasn't been really dealt with or managed or support. They haven't felt supported with. And so I work with the places with tension first. So if someone has had an experience, even in their life, that maybe isn't traumatic, but it's like a holding pattern, they feel like they're never supported by people. They're never supported by their relationships or anyone their whole life. They might be having, difficulties with their back. And I literally quite work with holding their back so that eventually the muscles start to yield a bit. And from there, we can start to address like some of the relational aspects and some of the pleasure. But these places of tension can be really interesting, kind of like portals of like, what's going on here? Maybe they don't all even have a story quite connected to it, but there's something going on where they feel tense. And it's not a manipulation of muscle necessarily all the time, as much as like the tissues need to be held and need for it to go, okay, in this moment, maybe I can just really, feel rivers holding of the back of my heart and my back for a minute. I don't have to do everything, and maybe I can feel some support right now.
Yeah. You just described my life for the last few weeks. I was actually going to ask, like, this is probably that. And I love, just the way in which you're talking about holding and creating that. As you were sharing, what came up for me is safety. Like, I mean, yeah, I like sex. I think sex is great. But one of the things that I discovered is that the ability to enjoy the pleasure and the experience of sex, the emotional intimacy, like the layers of it, were not there because of the sense of safety. And so, like, I have the experience, like, safety opens up a whole other element to pleasure.
Absolutely. And in my sessions with people, so safety is something that we can try to aim towards. Not everyone is always going to feel safe. This is just the way that bodies are in the world. And so I generally try to think of it as like, does the body feel welcomed? And so welcomed enough, does it feel okay enough where when someone says to me, I'm ready for touch, that they really do mean it, like not just with their mind, but with their bodies going, yeah, I'm okay with this too. So I work with people before, depending on, where they're at and what their journey is, where we work on boundaries and consent, practicing it before we do any kind of touch thing. So that by the time we get to that point, the person knows that they can say no to me, that they can ask for changes, that they can stop, they can pause, like it just kind of breaks down this like, oh, I'm just receiving touch from a practitioner, but I really have this relationship and art and communication with River to know that like my mind and my body are collaborating on this together so that I can ask for the things that I want and touch. And that I know that River is taking care of themselves and they will let me know if they need changes too. So it becomes this like breaking down of the like practitioner client dynamic, like you might receive in massage, and into this collaborative space together, and the body feels welcomed. Okay, I'm down for this.
I like that. Wow. They talk about how you should like talk about all these things before you like, have sex or and whatnot. And the way that you just described that, it was so beautiful. It's like, people are like, I don't know, it's not sexy. Why would we talk about all these other things? And it's like, know the rules of the game before you start to play. And there's that element of like allowing the body to be ready and to accept that. Like there's so many layers to it. So wow. And you said collaboration.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Because like I talk about pleasure negotiations a lot. I talk about like, I talk about consent and boundaries, but I feel like in some cases it feels very much like I'm gonna say this and we're gonna do it this way, whoever is talking. And that idea that like we're collaborating together on what is going to feel right, make us feel safe, allow us to trust each other, and allow for all that pleasure to be welcomed in. Like that's a whole other level of looking at it. It's like, I want to build something with you, even if it's just one night. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And that's like the back to this idea of practice. So I think it's really important that people, start to hear this language around boundaries and consent. And what does that really mean? And then in this space, we do practice this so that people can go, oh, I realized even though I was asking for what I want, I was taking care of you, or I was thinking about what you might want. And so then we get to be like, oh, this is interesting. So how about we kind of sit with this for a little bit and start to explore that and try different ways of doing it, so that hopefully when they get into relationships with folks, there can be some practice that they've already had with it, to be able to communicate with potential partners a little bit more easy. And this is especially helpful for people who, have had been violations with their bodies throughout their life. So it kind of helps to like be like, here's some other options, but we're tuning into language and feelings and sensations, and we're working through this slowly with curiosity.
Yeah, there's a balance to it. It's like opening up and then understanding the trauma and the experiences that you've had and all these like layered things, the balance of being able to not only heal them, but like see and be with and practice like once like it's not just baseline. There's an opportunity to actually flow into what is pleasurable from what can have been traumatic. So I think that's, thank you. We do have a question.
So excited.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Dabby. So are there any specific practices that you do with clients or recommend for people who have unexplained non-medical stomach issues due to chronic stress and trauma?
Yeah, I think I have worked with people with stomach issues. So my scope of practice is that I don't do any kind of medical advice. This is really like what I tend to do is just sort of, if I'm working with people, we do some touch practices eventually around what's going on to see if there is any emotional stuff that comes up for folks, if that ends up being a part of it. I also like, we do explore heat, we explore temperature. That's not usually though what people are kind of coming in for, but stomach issues do tend to be a part of like, if people are feeling just nausea around some of the sensations that are coming up, like they might feel overwhelmed for a minute, in which we pause and we sort of check in. But unexplained stuff that might be a little bit perhaps out of my scope of practice, but it can be like pretty much what I feel like is just this is an exploration and curiosity. And this is the practice of tuning into and being like, what happens if I apply here? What happens if I massage myself? Or if River and I work on touch in this area, does that change anything? Is this an emotional thing that's coming up? Does all of a sudden like a story appear, or maybe not, but there's other sensations that are connected to it? So that one might be just a little bit like we would have to connect and really chat about what's going on and dive into a little bit more around like what are some of the stories that are come with it. But I think exploring touch can be helpful, whether it is just receiving massage there or just like holding yourself. So I think like there's so much power in holding. So like we think of massage always like kind of like doing something, which is really great, feels really good, but also like just holding yourself and holding your body and seeing if there's anything that it needs, asking if there's anything that it wants. And maybe it's just, I don't know, for a little while, but you get to like hold that part of yourself, tell it you love it, you have compassion for it, and that, yeah, that you care about it.
Oh, I have definitely experienced like I've experienced emotionally induced nausea. I don't know that this is like certainly I imagine not the same thing, but definitely like a physical reaction to emotions, to like I can feel it moving in my body. And it takes something to like let that go and to not be attached to like not being attached to the physical sensation as much as the emotional state. And I won't lie, sometimes it's easier to go numb, and sometimes it's easier to experience and like be with it. So I know that was one of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about. And then this question also brings up the conversation around healing and rehabilitation. So it's take whichever one you want. But yeah, those are two things that I wanted to hear about.
Yeah, there's sometimes when I'm working with folks, like nausea might appear. I would say it tends to often, in my experience anyway, and the people who tend to come to me might experience it with they have especially vaginismus. And so that's pain usually on the entrance of the vulva, but it's pain with penetration or just feeling like oof about it. And so that nausea sometimes is really connected to that. And when we do come up to it, we do pause. So we don't want to like go any place where we overwhelm the body again, but that we just sort of come up to these edges and go, whoa, 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 okay, maybe let's pause for a minute. Let's get a cool pack if like the stomach's feeling really hot or like, and then it might pass. Sometimes people also like all of a sudden feel really hot. So these are kind of these like discharging moments where the body is like pushing through something, and that can be okay with people. Like all of a sudden they're like, I'm really hot. And it might only be like 30 seconds. And then they're like, whew, okay, let's work through something right there. Like, yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on that. It doesn't appear too often, but it is something that like as a practitioner I always have to be aware of. And it's mostly like, hey, why don't we just like pause and we check in to see how are you feeling comfortable with this? And some people are like, yeah, and we just kind of go from there to take care of the person and their body and slow down a bit.
Nice. So we definitely talked about well, let me just dive into this one. So one of my loved ones is in a rehabilitation process, and we've spoken about the benefit of pleasure and like those elements being important to that process, to the ability to even, I'm actually going to say like healing faster. I'm very curious to know what you see and what you think about that.
Can you just like maybe share a little bit more about like what do you mean by rehabilitation? Because that's like a pretty broad term.
So they're learning to walk again.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So like there's been an injury and people are trying to get better. And that. Okay. So, um, I mean, that is definitely something that can be really powerful for people. So I think one of the important things is that it is about choice. So like if people might want to have that as a part of their rehabilitation process. Some might just be like, I can't right now because I'm focused so much on getting better. And that being able to make a choice like that is a part of the sex positivity. It's like you might not. That's totally cool. It's up to you. But if people do choose to do that and want that to be a part of it, that can be a way to kind of just reconnect with their experience of what it's like to be in their body now, to explore the pleasure that they might be feeling, especially if like they are had injury to the pelvis or can't feel or anything like that, to kind of explore the sensations, enjoyments of like your hand and these other kinds of places, to yeah, just keep this like my compass is pleasure even throughout this, and I'm exploring what my body's going through, and I'm working with pleasure in the capacity that I can, because pleasure and pain can be really challenging for people. And I would say like folks, with disabilities who are sex educators really like have taught me so much about that, and people who have chronic pain, and that pleasure can sometimes be difficult or just a part of what they're enjoying and experiencing about their bodies, and getting to like know, especially people I think in rehabilitation are really in tune with their bodies, because they have to be, they're trying to like do movement or learning to walk again or things like that, that really is like they are already focused, and so the practice, whatever they choose to do, can really support them in their healing and reconnecting with their sensations and what they can feel,
Yeah.
and what they desire.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, and hearing you talk, like it's not that traditional, again, like, like the sexual pleasure conversation. It has little to do with that, but like actually experiencing the fact that the body will change how it experiences and enjoys pleasure or doesn't. And so, thank you for really diving into that one and sharing. Yeah, I really hope this is like helping people out there to be a part of this conversation, because who like I feel like it's very rarely talked about, like there's this non-sexualizing of people, like, oh, you don't do that anymore. And that's the same thing with pleasure. I mean, if we're even focusing on pleasure. So yeah, I think that's really awesome. Um, do you have like, what else would you like to share on this topic? I know,
Mm.
right?
I mean, I think like if folks are out there listening, I think it's more just like what are the start noticing the things that you already do, the small little things in your day. Like I had someone reach out to me and be like, oh, so I was like, rubbing against my curtains, and I just thought, God, they feel so good. And is that what you mean? And it's like, yes. That's exactly what I'm talking about. These like, we can't pay attention to our sensations all the time. That's really not how we're built. We are doing other things, but like these like little blips of like pleasure, these little like, oh, I'm already doing this. Like even like someone was like, it feels really good to brush my teeth. um, but also like, just creating a practice that is works and is sustainable for you in your life, and to be just kind and gentle. And I don't know if I'm saying anything new, but it's really this is what I wanted to say. So one of the really interesting things about creating a pleasure practice is that eventually, or even from the beginning, maybe, but eventually you're going to have to really be compassionate with yourself as things appear. And so or just as you're like, I'm noticing this thing, or like, I don't know, why can't I do my practice? I should do my practice. And you start being really hard on yourself. But like, you know, or even your own desires, once you start witnessing them, or maybe things are coming up, like to be kind of compassionate and to really look at yourself with like this awe. What that does, it's not, so self-pleasure, the stuff doesn't have to just be this individual thing. It's actually like, it's individual, but it's going out at the same time. But when you are kind and compassionate to yourself and you witness yourself through that lens and you practice doing that, you will be able to do this with other people. And so I think that is like something that ends up happening, is that people are like, oh, I don't feel so scared of other people's sexuality or the things that they like. And I feel like I'm looking at things with more curiosity and more compassion and more understanding. Or maybe I don't like it, what other people are doing, but I can be like, woohoo. And so it's really like, it's the healing, sure, from the inside. But what happens is that people start to relate to other people's sexuality really different. And that's kind of one of these like things that happens along the way that people are like, whoa, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And just to throw in like humanity, connecting with people's humanity. Like,
yes, we are constantly dehumanizing one another. And when we connect with our bodies, so we talked a little bit about like capitalism or the cultures that we're in, and like grinding, working, and being exploited through labor, that it is that disconnection from the body that it relies upon. So when people start to connect to their body, they start to be like, I don't want this. I don't like this. This isn't okay. What's happening out there in the world, or what's happening in my community, it's not okay with me anymore because I feel it. And I, you know, or I'm noticing the way I judge people. I don't want to do that anymore. I don't like that. You know, or I judge people on their sexuality, or, you know, this like, so it is this really humanizing thing. So people think, oh, masturbation's all about yourself. And it's like, fuck yeah. But also like, it really creates this, it isn't, it's this like spiraling in towards yourself, and you're moving out towards other people. And yeah, you were saying this actually is the world I want to live in.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I say about masturbation is that, like, how are you going to teach someone else what you like if you don't know yourself?
That too. Yeah. Because we're, you know, I mean, part of pleasure practice is like sort of, well, we take stock of like, how did you learn about masturbation? How did you learn about pleasure? How did you learn about these things? And that can be kind of challenging for people. And then they start to be like, well, do you believe in this anymore? And they might say, yes, I believe in some of these things, but I don't believe in that. And so, you know, this is like starting to move into what is really true for people in their hearts around their own sexuality, not just what they've been taught, but then also exploring themselves, their bodies in a very slow way to go, oh, how I learned about pleasure was through this avenue, and how I actually feel about the way I touch myself, it looks like this. And so if I know more about how I like to touch myself and I'm practicing that, I can better convey that to future partners of like, actually, I like to be touched like this, and this is what I like. So yeah, that can be another benefit. So a benefit.
I love it. I mean, I don't see anything not beneficial about pleasure. I mean,
yeah.
Stop and feel the drapes. I'm all about that.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've been talking this whole time about pleasure practices, and I love the amount of creativity that is coming into this space and into this conversation. I know we gotta do that. So please, I would love to hear you share about the Erotic Arts Project and the other work that you're doing around like the creative expression of pleasure.
Yes. So good. Yeah. So as a part of my somatic sex educator training, I took like the level 2, and you have to do this whole project. I was like really struggling at that point in my life. I was going through this heartbreak. I was just like, oh, like it was just embodied stuff. This is terrible. Like, pleasure. Ugh. So I was like, well, what else brings me joy? And I was like, well, I'm an artist. So creating really brings me joy. So I thought, what if I have my pleasure practice and uh, involve creativity into it, the practice of creativity at the same time, or like one right after the other, however, to just be like, what happens? So it was just kind of an experiment. And I went through and I was like, this blowing my mind. Like, of course, like for a long, throughout history, it's like the pelvis and sexual and creative energy have been these
Right.
like dancing
Yep.
things, but put into practice what really happens. And it was like, well, this supported me. I was not really interested in having a pleasure practice, but my creativity was the thing, the thread that like pulled me through. And also the sensual experience of your paints and your yarns and these like things that, they're sexy.
Yes.
So I, would
Sorry.
yeah, would self pleasure or do some embodiment, and then I was doing collage at the time, so I would just make, and I would lay down the collage, but I wasn't thinking about it, and that was like the key thing. I was creating for the sake of creating. I was just for pleasure and the enjoyment. It wasn't like, oh, I have to sell this, or this has got to be in some gallery now, or I hope my Instagram followers like it. I mean, I did think about that a little bit. In the moment, though, I was focused on what images are calling to me. What are the colors that I'm interested in? I'm just going to start laying these down because I had already done this like pleasurable embodied practice. And then sometimes I would even like weave them in or stack them, like do my embodiment practice, go over to my desk and like lay some stuff down, go back to self pleasure, and then go back to the thing. So it was great. And it ended up being this amazing project. And I was like, this is like the work I want to fucking do. I love this. This is bridging my like best worlds together here.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Erotic Arts Project came out of that. And it's kind of been this dream. And I ended up asking a couple other folks. They all ended up being queer, which was great and interesting. Just like, it was like, all right, who wants to like hop in on what it would be like if I helped people through something like this? So I had some other somatic sex educators that were like, yeah, I want to do it. And then a lot of them did collage, and some of them did some poetry and stuff like that. And then we ended up having a show. So we ended up having a show. They were trying to create, but it was a visual thing. We ended up having an art show in Santa Cruz, California. So that's how this has started. And it's been, and then, through the pandemic, it's sort of chilled out a little bit, and now it's starting to get this like momentum again.
Right. Yo, I love just like when I hear you say that, it kind of reminds me of like vision boards. It's like that like powerful, expressive, like this is what I've gone through and this is what I'm creating. And like it's whatever they look like.
Yeah.
Like, and like I don't say that to mean collage. Like I'm really thinking like that artistic like undertone of it could look like anything, it could feel like anything, it could be anything, but it resonates with you and it resonates with other people when that happens. So like you're doing it out of your place of passion, out of your place of care and love and pleasure. And you can't help, like people can't help but be drawn to that kind of conversation because they want that.
Yeah. And it's for people who are artists who claim that, or people who don't. Like, this is really, but there's so many rules around creativity, and there's so many rules that we create around ourselves with sexuality. And so this is like a really juicy place to be like, oh, I want to go paint. And then I realized, I don't know if I should use this canvas because maybe it should be used in another project that's more important. And it's like, whoa, how interesting, like, what are these rules I know you know. So this is the practice of like enjoying the sketchbook, of aimlessly wandering, pleasurably and joyfully meandering with your creativity and your body.
Oh, wow. You should see the stack of canvases I have. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And I'm not good enough for any of them.
Oh, yes, but you are. Yes.
Oh my God. That is, yeah, thank you for calling that out too, because it's like that I have to impress you crap versus I get to feel myself. I love it. I love it. So how can people find out about like more of your work, reach you, know what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So,
Or
so
not.
yeah, like these are kind of think of them as like two projects in a way. It's like I have my like River Drosera on Instagram. Riverdrosera.life is my website. So people can look there. I feel like I'm the most socially active on Instagram. I guess tougher and tougher, but I feel like that realm is really more about the like people who have had trauma or who really need to take things slow, who really want to like learn to ask what they want, go over boundaries, address these emotional scar tissue tension places before they feel ready to kind of do something else. And then the Erotic Arts Project is the Arts Project.life. And so there'll be more information coming up there soon because I'm going to start workshops. I'm like, I just want to do this already. Like for me also, it's my own practice. And there's Instagram that we'll be having more things coming along the way too. And that feels like it's focused really on just straight up pleasure, like the enjoy, there'll be things that come up for sure of like all these, the barriers that we put in front of ourselves with creativity or sexuality. But it's really like, let's just create from the pure like love and enjoyment of it. And then people who are creative types, when they do that, when they're just enjoying the sketchbook, it really does affect their overall creative arts practice. We're like, oh, okay, not everything has to be something, but here's this like pleasurable thing. So I'm really excited about workshops and thinking about something that's like creating from the pelvis and just like tuning into the body, creating from there and enjoying the sensuality of making.
So. Ooh.
Totally.
Okay, and then you mentioned earlier one-on-one sessions, or at least that's what I think I heard. How do people find you to book those? Is it all still through the social media?
Yeah, through social media. Well, there's the Instagram, but my website has a place to I have consultations with everyone. That's really important to me. And it's really fun for me to do that with folks. Like it's just, even if people don't book or whatever, we get to kind of chat and be like, oh, what's going on? But yeah, that's a way for us, to really see if we're a good fit and what's going on and like how I can best be of support to someone. So I do these like free consultations, or about 20 minutes or so. People can find that on the River Drosera website. In the Erotic Arts Project, I did have this online course, which was expressive erotic play. And I might just be breaking that down into actual live workshops. But I was coaching people through that as well. And so I don't know, we'll see where this goes. Like that's still like this bubbling up sort of.
It's in its creative space.
It is. I'm meandering with it along the way, joyfully.
Yes, I love it. I mean, that's how we create and grow and do anything, like we think it's going to be pew. And the truth of the matter is it's like, all right, we're going to, right. We're going to hit some hills and some valleys and go on long trails.
Exactly.
Oh, thank you so much for having this conversation today. I have learned so much. I have been touched and moved and pleased. Thank you for being here. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you. I feel like really honored to have been asked to be on here and to have connected with you. And it's really cool. And yeah, I don't know. I feel really, let's see, I feel really like buzzy in my chest and excited. I feel my pelvis touching the chair and it feels all warm. So I'm feeling very good. And mostly I feel really, really grateful that that you have created this project. And undertaking a podcast is a huge creative project. And I just feel honored to be like a little part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh my God. Yes. We definitely have more work to do together. All right, everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us today. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. We do have events coming up this season. You can find the Chase November 4th through 7th and learn more at chase.pet. Also, the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit is coming to you February 4th and 5th. RSVP at sexhealthsummit.com, and we will have those early bird tickets in October. Get one-on-one coaching with me. You can connect in my link tree for a connection session, and we'll have an opportunity to get to know each other. Again, ask us anything. Appreciate all of your comments, questions, information, and we would love to have it here on the show. There's the link to the Google form in the chat. And then also get access to our bonus content. We have wonderful conversations in the background in the green room and the after chat. You can find that bonus content and get to know us just a little bit better through our Patreon. And that you can find that at patreon.com/Nika Sherelle. All right, learn more about our work at theitcast.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. Until next time.